Hey, I'm Miranda, and you're listening to or watching Unraveling Matters.
You did ask earlier about how it affects relationships right now, how all these conversations are affecting relationships. And I'm completely exhausted at the moment. So I'm not trying to convince anybody anymore. I am over that. I have dropped the rope on that particular activity in life. Right now, I don't think it's fair to ask Black friends to engage in an argument where your perspective is justifying why all lives matter, or how we don't need to focus on race because racism isn't a thing or race doesn't exist. Everybody's an individual person. Because if you look at every situation as an individual situation, then you can't see the pervasive nature with which racism persists in this nation and across the world. You lose it. And so I have lost relationships with a few people over the course of this time frame because they're not in a position to want to learn. And so for me, when I'm in a conversation, it's number one, I'm assessing, is this person coming from a space of wanting to learn or needing to justify their own position?
Yep.
Because if they're there's nothing I'm going to say that shifts them from that. So it's just a waste of my own energy, and I'm going to be mad and upset. So all the Black people, drop the rope on that. I think if somebody does want to learn, that's cool. Lean into it if you have the emotional space to do so, and being willing to share your stories, but only do that. Don't cast your pearls before swine. Don't share the vulnerable, the hardships with people who don't care to hold it in a sacred manner, because that's just going to leave you more hurt. So for those who are willing to lean in and they want to learn, they want to know, so that they can be better people in their lives, I'm all for it. But it is incredibly painful to try to explain to another person why your life matters when they aren't even willing to recognize the fact that my life could be endangered.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't, I agree, but it doesn't even go that deep for me.
Mm-hmm.
I woke up one morning to I'm everybody's one Black friend here. So I woke up one morning to over 40 messages across my DMs asking me about Black people issues after Mr. Floyd was murdered. And it's too much for me. It was just too much. Mm-hmm. And it's people who are willing to learn, but I can't be individually tutor 40 something odd people every day. That's exhausting. I'll make videos. I will help you. I'll give you some knowledge, but I'm not doing that. I have one friend, I told her she could ask me whatever she wants, because across our friendship, we've always leaned on each other and she's always helped me. So I'll give her whatever she needs. Everybody else needs to leave me alone. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I'm tired.
I support you.
Mm-hmm. You know, for me as a white person, also recognizing the importance of I want to hear and support and learn from all of my friends of color and love on them in the best way that I can. But also recognizing that one of the best ways I can do that is to also talk with my other white friends and my white family members, and to have those conversations that are harder, find that sweet spot, that growth area where maybe some change can happen. Also, I don't want to not try in my own circles to have some of those conversations. And I think that's so hard in this world, because we get so defensive. We want to talk about how we can protect ourselves and all the privilege that comes along with whiteness, whether we want to acknowledge that or not. I've had those spaces in my life of it, feels like there's something that could be taken away from me here. And it's like, wait a minute, really? Let's think about that. Yeah, it's a journey, and it doesn't stop, and it's hard and it's tough, but it's worth it. And my hope is always that it will be worth it to everybody else too.
I'm glad you're having those conversations. Let me ask you this, if you're willing to answer. As a not Black person, you must hear comments that people make that are marginally racist, all the way racist, tiptoeing, dipping a toe in racism. Like, how is that for you? Like, I know that you're an ally. So how do you experience that, and how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's a process, I will definitely say. I think there's a big part of me that just kind of shares the hurt, and that it's hurtful to me to hear other people talk about these generalizations and these really hurtful things about people that look like people that I love. One of the things that I often kind of find myself feeling and saying when I hear some of those comments, especially from people in my closer circles, is it feels like you're talking about somebody that I love very dearly right now, even though they might be making a general sweeping comment or something like that, just to try to make it a little bit more personal for them, to hear. So like, maybe you're not going to be able to hear the pain of the, community of people of color. Maybe you can't hear that for whatever reason. But can a starting point be that maybe you can hear my pain a little bit in that? Maybe that's an opening to kind of have a broader conversation about all of the rest of humanity that are people too. Not that it's about my pain in that, but can that be a doorway to humanize it a little bit when it's maybe feels so far removed from there? Because I mean, we can talk about all of the history and all of those pieces, and that's very important, but unless there's, I feel like, this baseline understanding of we're talking about people and we're talking about pain and we're talking about suffering and how can we make something different there, then like the history lessons aren't going to go very far. I just feel like I'm going to sit there giving a lecture that nobody wants to listen to.
That's interesting. You're making it a relatable, more human and understanding connection to bridge that gap, rather than going, hey, but Black people have been disenfranchised and marginalized for years. Because I think people know that. I don't think they care much.
I think the denial that actually occurs.
Right.
Because if you attribute everything to not as a system, and you only attribute it to individuals,
yeah,
and the thought is, oh, they're just not working hard enough. They're just not doing X. They're not doing Y. Or the police catch you. You shouldn't have been doing something illegal. You shouldn't have ran. You shouldn't have reacted that way. Then it becomes not a global issue, but an individualized issue. I've absolutely had conversations with people who don't believe that you're disenfranchised. Pull yourself up by bootstraps. You'd be better off.
I've had those conversations surrounding police brutality, because the comment is always, well, it's not just Black people, the police are brutalizing everyone. Like, they are. They're just brutalizing us more. So if you give us equal rights and you dismantle the system, it protects everybody. So where's the conflict?
Right. It's almost like I wish you believed in the system. It benefits everybody for the police to be restructured, because raw numbers, white people do get killed more by police. Statistically, we Black and brown people are killed at higher rates and assaulted at higher rates. But they should care. The stories, I remember one that was just really devastating to me. It was an autistic boy, this is a number of years ago. A white kid had a Wii remote in his hand and the police officer shot and killed him. And then I like to say, where's All Lives Matter then? This is a teenager who just happened to open the door with a Wii remote, and he's special, so doesn't process in the same way. Along with the autism was also a level of mental retardation there. And so wasn't responding to commands, and this kid dies. You should be outraged. Everybody should be outraged by that. But it should across the board. You want to go hard in the paint for All Lives Matter? I need you to act like All Lives Matter.
Yes, like that gentleman that got knocked down by the police, that 75-year-old gentleman.
Yeah, and then they blamed him. Oh my gosh. Like, really? They knocked down grandpa and y'all are you're like, well, he shouldn't have stood there. Even with him being an older white man, it just made me think of dad. My father is not physically stable. So if you pushed him, he would fall. And to watch that pool of blood like create under his head was so sad to me.
But it was also divisive. I keep thinking about relationships.
Yeah.
People can't agree on something, to me, that is just obviously egregious. How is that up for debate? Like, there's no reason he needed, even if he was irritating that police officer or whoever that was.
He could have just walked around them. Like,
Yep.
Isn't that the same thing we teach our kids?
Right.
Someone's irritating you, walk away. Don't hit them. Walk away.
Right.
What I don't understand is how we can accept that people are still traumatized from going through the Holocaust in a different country, but there's no conceptual understanding of the trauma of minorities and Black people and natives in this country. Like, less years have passed, but Black people, natives, you guys should be over it.
Yeah.
And it makes
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, and I think, again, too, going back to the start of the conversation of just the symbols, like, who also are we glorifying in all of that, right? So you don't see the statues of the Holocaust aren't statues of Hitler, there's statues of Anne Frank and all of these heroes and revolutionaries that were fighting for the oppressed people group. To apply that to where we're at with some of these symbols related to the Civil War and to slavery, what are we glorifying? Not the symbols all the way of, like Martin Luther King and all of those pieces. It's the slave selling block that's what's in the middle of the town square. And that message is just so backwards.
So backwards. Someone had posted, someone who grew up in the same town where I grew up. So they remember going on a school trip to the slave auction block that used to be in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And they were only 9 years old. And that the tour guide spoke about that auction block with such pride, it disturbed them as a 9-year-old. It just, their little spirit was like, this is not right. So if a 9-year-old knows that, I think it's willful for someone to choose to not know that. Someone had posted on, I made that video with Dr. McSwain talking about the mental health impact of racism. And someone had commented underneath one of the shared copies of that they didn't think there was a mental health aspect to it. That that was bupkis. I thought, really? So what about bullying? Do you agree that when a child is bullied, there's a mental health aspect to that? But systemic racism, that doesn't have any impact at all. Right. You just roll off of it.
Psychological abuse, there's no impact of that. If you call your kid stupid every day, there's no psychological impact there.
It's because we don't value mental health. I don't think it's
not at all.
Tell people, Jay, keep your body healthy. What about our minds?
Right. Well, I think that's a great point too, is that, even if, someone's not at the space to be able to accept, okay, maybe there's a mental health impact because maybe we don't believe more globally that mental health issues are a thing, that category aside, we also know from research that statistically there are physical health impacts of systemic racism on people of color and on minorities, and that there's not a lot of wiggle room there. There's less access to healthcare. There's bias in the medical treatment that people are receiving. Elena, you had talked in one of the previous videos about just how trauma genetically alters one's person, and those altered genes get passed down generationally. So it's, yes, we absolutely, I think, would all agree that there's a mental health impact, but if that's not something that we're able to see yet, can we at least acknowledge that there's a very physical one that happens at a genetic material level?
They're fraying my telomeres. That's what they're doing. Right. Fraying them, shortening my life. I'll tell you something. I just have all these stories, but we last summer went to go to a slave plantation in Louisiana. And the bus that was transporting us was dropping people off at 2 different plantations. The tour guide, the way that he spoke about slavery and made it almost sound idyllic. Oh, the people were treated so well on these plantations. The tour guide on the bus before he dropped us off. People that they just decided to stay. They didn't want to go anywhere when slavery ended. They just stayed here to share a crop. Life was so good. And the people got off the tour bus at the first plantation to see all this idyllic slavery, antebellum crap. And then I went on to, the Whitney Plantation? Whitney Plantation, which is really a slave memorial on a plantation, where they discussed what slavery really was and how people were dying trying to prepare sugarcane. Like blood was literally in sugarcane as they were getting the sugar and all that out. That hit me so hard. I couldn't stop thinking about how this man was describing slavery like it was nothing. No, we just chose to stay there. And like the difference between that and going to the slave memorial, it's still sitting with me. It's a year later and I'm still upset about it. We carry these things with us. And I'm glad that we're having this kind of a candid conversation, because I wish people really knew and understood the impact of these things.
Right. And you think too about, again, going back to the system and what also would it mean to leave? We see this all the time when we think about like domestic violence relationships, when we think about child abuse. There's a part of you as being a recipient of abuse that has to, for your own protection in your mind, try to justify that it could be okay in some ways. And just because you've maybe gotten to that mental space to kind of protect yourself and keep your morale up and keep you going, it doesn't mean that that's okay. You know, it's not something that should be glorified as well. All of these people kind of, you know, transcended, and that meant that they were viewing this as this great thing and this great opportunity. Like, no, it's a survival mentality to try to keep yourself going day to day. And so when you have this idea of like, well, okay, you're free, leave, you can go do what you want. It also takes a lot of energy when you've spent so much energy convincing yourself to be okay somehow in this really horrendous situation. You're also not just going to be able to go, oh yeah, okay, fine, I can be independent and free and I can leave, and you have no resources, right, no money, no roof over your head. Where are you going to go? What are you going to do? You know, what sort of options do you have there? It's not going to be this, all right, just go and do it.
Right. How do you even do that?
Right.
That's something that catches me. I was thinking about how growing up Black in America, you have to learn everybody else's history. You have to have a deep understanding of everyone else, but no one has to have a deep understanding of you. I have to understand how, you know, learning about slavery is uncomfortable for other people and accommodate that discomfort and go, okay, I know you're uncomfortable, but let's push through this discomfort. But no one's coming to me saying, I know that this must be really hard for you, and I know that nobody knows your history, and I know that you can't speak to your pain except for in very small, private, safe groups, because otherwise you're vulnerable to receive more abuse. It's just the holding on to that pain, having to be complicit in your own abuse is annoying.
Absolutely.
We're so sad. Do we have any hope?
There's some people out there. I think I am so thankful for the geography and history teacher I had in junior high. It's this huge white man, Mr. Eggspieler. I remember him to this day. And I had him for like 4 years in different classes. And every year, he would make us watch movies like Roots and Glory and Jeremiah Johnson and about Native American. He made us. He did not care if you were uncomfortable. He's like, oh no, we're talking about this. We're going to learn about the maps. We're going to learn real history. And that's kind of where I got my kind of interest in learning about my story and other stories. But that was the one teacher. And to this day, I'm very thankful that I was in a classroom where he addressed, even if someone said something that was off, I was his TA. Like, he didn't care, but he made it a point to identify racism when it was occurring, to identify when people were saying something prejudiced, to have those conversations in the classroom. And he didn't shy away from parents at all. And that was good for me to see coming from a white male. I think that helped me. But I don't know that those people exist that early in development, that early in history classes. He didn't care if you were 13 or 12. No, you're going to learn this.
I think for me, I've been reflecting on this a lot this week, but I was just thinking, I was like, I think I honestly probably know more about Native American history than I do about the history of Black people in America. And still the amount that I know is probably not nearly enough. And to be very candid, I, before listening to your lovely video, Miranda, about Juneteenth, I didn't know what that was. And so I'm so thankful just for all the resources to be able to, you know, recognize how much I don't know. You know, I've learned a very whitewashed and idealized, you know, form of American history. And that's what a lot of youth in America are taught, and probably overseas as well. And just being able to recognize that all of these stories are important and we should all know all of them. It's not just about the stories that glorify people that look like me. The beautiful thing about this country is that we do have so many people from so many different places, and we like to say that, but our actions also don't show that we value all of these different people in the same way. What also makes that real is also having relationships with people that look different than me. As somebody is a part of the majority culture, you know, you have that privilege to be able to say, well, I don't have to touch that if I don't want to. But if you have people in your life that you love and that you care about that look different from you, again, it just kind of, it's a human experience. I think that was a big turning point for me, is having more relationships with people that look different from me. Because I grew up in a very white community. My world has gotten a lot bigger since I've experienced different parts of the world, and I hope to continue to grow in that and to learn and love more and more different types of people.
Dr. McSwain, do you have a message of hope?
Hope for the day. I like that. Expand your circles. One of the most exciting things I think in grad school was meeting somebody who was Indian and learning all about her culture and food and leaning into all of it, and then exposing the kids. So now they eat Indian food and they're like, oh, that's cool because mom has a friend. You know, for them, apparently meeting new friends means different types of food, but that's culture too, right? Like, part of my life is about food and connecting over that. But I think a message of hope is we can bond, and food is a good way to do that.
On that, I will end. I like the idea of that. Now I'm hungry. Thank you guys so much for having this very, very candid conversation. I like the insight, and I like to hear about everybody else's experiences. So thank you for sharing your lived experiences with people.
Yay.
Yay. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
You have a bye. Bye. There's our fake bye.
Which bye is that?
Thank you so much for listening. I really hope that you found this conversation helpful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing so that you'll be notified of Series 2, where we unravel trauma all the way across the lifespan.